Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Peter Gregory. He's been around the block. He's an author, he's a freelancer, and a retired security leader. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, thank you, Pete, and appreciate you inviting me on today.
Absolutely. Well, could you give our audience a brief description of your career up to this point?
Sure thing. My career started in the late 70s as student employment at Nevada, Reno, operating their Cyber 6400 supercomputer. I went into programming, software development, software engineering throughout the 80s in a few different industries. And then I made a pivot into cybersecurity in the late 90s, and I haven't looked back. I started in security engineering, but pivoted into GRC and risk and compliance and audit and all the things that go along with that. And that took me all the way up to this year.
Very cool. And I think you said that you have some books out as well.
Yes, I do. I had an opportunity to get into the publishing business in the early 90s when one of my colleagues invited me to be a tech reviewer for her first book on Informix databases. Remember Informix? Maybe you don't.
Not me personally.
Yeah, they were better than Oracle, but Oracle had better marketing, and that's what wins the game there. So that got me into the publishing business, and I wrote my first book in the late 90s, a book called Solaris Security, or how to harden the Solaris operating system, which was Sun Microsystems' version of Unix, AT&T System 5 Unix, but with Sun Microsystems additions like all the different vendors were doing. And from then till now, I've written over 50 books. I've kind of gotten into the groove of writing certification study guides, and I've done a few dozen of those, and I'm working on a number of those right now.
Nice. Well, a lot of security certifications out there. Maybe we'll cross that bridge at some point in the conversation, which ones you see as more valuable than others. But we usually start the show with, is the talent gap real in your mind? And if so, what would you say it looks like?
Well, it's kind of real and not real. It's kind of part reality and part mirage, I think. This is a multifaceted issue, and I have a number of thoughts of that, having had to look for employment a few times in my career, as well as having been a hiring manager for the last 2 or 3 decades. I've kind of seen it from both sides. So a few things I might say about that, just to run through kind of a quick list, is job listings are duplicated across platforms. So any organization that wants to hire someone might list it in 5 places. So some people count that as 5, but there's really only one job, right? Another thing that employers do, and I'm guilty of it myself, is some job openings or job listings are really contingency listings just to keep a pipeline of qualified candidates going in the event that one of their people goes out the door. And you don't want to have to start over from nothing. You want to have a fresh pipeline, but that's not very nice for people looking for work, right? Then there are some job listings that are required by law or policy, even though the organization already has a candidate they've selected. They just have to advertise the job anyway. But then where it comes down to where I've seen this happen is that many organizations are looking for low-priced unicorns that don't exist. They want people that can do everything, and yet they want to pay bottom dollar for it. And so they keep these job listings open for months and months and months, waiting for that candidate that doesn't exist, frankly. And those are the main areas that I see there, although some of this is self-inflicted as well, because a lot of cybersecurity people, we're good at tech and maybe our people skills aren't what they should be. And so it may be that our resumes or our interviews, don't go so well because we're not used to job interviews. We're good at our job, but it doesn't mean that we can necessarily explain it in a way that makes us an attractive candidate.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. Yeah, you kind of brought up the idea of ghost jobs, which it's hard to put a number on how many jobs don't actually represent an opening that could be filled by somebody currently on the market. I would say, people talk a lot about it these days because I think they're looking for a convenient scapegoat as to why they're not getting callbacks for their applications. I would still say it's probably a small fraction of the number of job postings. But yeah, I mean, the point about postings being across different platforms, I mean, even across different cities, if the role is remote, and those remote jobs are going to get far more applicants than any on-site job. So if you have 1,000 applicants per city in each of these remote job posting listings, that adds up pretty quick. And yeah, like you said, there's only one opening. So it's hard to get our arms around as an industry how many roles are actually open at any given time. And I think a lot of people are still citing the old ISC2 statistics, and they've kind of since walked some of those back, or some of their stances back a little bit, saying that, well, no, it's actually maybe there aren't so many millions of unfilled security jobs. And I think part of the reason that people like to cite those statistics is because the numbers are so large, and people want to think that, hey, it's a growing field, it's not a contracting field, that there is all this demand for our skill sets. In my experience as a recruiter, I would say there is demand for certain skill sets, but it's not evenly distributed. I would say we don't necessarily have a shortage broadly, like people always said that we did. I think we have more small shortages in specific subject matter expert functional areas, and usually at the senior individual contributor level. Especially in this market, it seems like everybody wants to hire somebody that's a doer and not a manager of people. And I don't know if that's just not, or an unwillingness, like you said, to not pay the money for the executives or the managers, or what. But I guess do you have a sense for like what skill sets are in demand right now and which aren't, or any thoughts on that?
Oh, let's see. For practitioners, I mean, just broadly speaking, to be a strong candidate, you've got to have really deep knowledge of the entire technology stack, from network fundamentals and internals to operating system internals and fundamentals, how they're attacked, how they're hardened, and so forth. But I'm painting with a pretty broad brush there, and more on the SecOps side, I think. But organizations sometimes, or are often, they don't know exactly what they're looking for, or they aren't able to identify the right strengths in individual candidates and be willing to work with them. It seems as though, many organizations, they want a ready-made, ready-built, and fully trained and certified security professional, rather than entertaining the prospect of making a security professional. In other words, hiring someone that's a little earlier in their career, hiring the right kind of person for culture fit, attitude, and so on, and then training them on the various skills and technologies they need. And of course, that takes more time and effort, and training is expensive. But it's a lot of extra work, and sometimes management is just spread too thin, and they can't or won't take the time to grow those professionals.
Yeah, well, I think often that's the root cause of a lot of the hiring issues that we see nowadays, where hiring is more reactive than it is proactive, and hiring managers want somebody that can hit the ground running, quote unquote, because they're hiring reactively and they haven't planned to hire this person. So it's like, okay, well, what do we need them to do immediately? What skills do they need to have? Because we don't have time to train this person, or like you said, the limited budget, limited headcount, limited resources, a lot of constraints, it seems like. And I don't know, I get the sense that it wasn't always so bad. I don't know if it's just economic headwinds, or companies not valuing security as much as maybe they did 5-10 years ago. But I hear a lot from security leaders like, I would love to hire more people. We have all these projects we want to get done, but I can't get new headcount approved. And I'm using all the statistics and speaking in the language of the board, and it just doesn't matter. It's like, I don't know. Can we get away from the idea that security is a cost center, I guess? Because it seems to be a lot of issues stem downstream from that.
Yeah, that could have kind of opens another door to another topic here in that risk doesn't appear on the balance sheet. So yes, security is often just seen as an overhead cost rather than as revenue protection. But then again, on financial statements, revenue protection really just exists only as a cost and not as anything about reducing risk. And that's just the way accounting works these days. So that's kind of tough.
Yeah. Well, and again, you want people that can solve problems on day one. And to your point from earlier, salaries don't seem to have continued to go up, I guess, the last 5 years or so. And again, I think it's just partially economic headwinds, companies not wanting to spend money right now, uncertainty in the government, a lot of things kind of working against people that are, trying to hire or, do more with less on their teams. What's the business case, I guess, to be made? So say you're a hiring manager and you're at a small company, you have a small team of 5 security people, you have an engineer, GRC person maybe, but you don't have very well fleshed out departments and you have a new headcount approved and you only have one position open. How can you justify making the hire of the junior person when the senior, if you only have one headcount to be approved, and you have a lot of projects you need to get done? Is there a case to be made there to hire somebody more junior?
Well, it's hard to say. It depends on the culture of the team and of the executive management that security reports to. It just depends on the organization's philosophy for talent development. Honestly, I would argue for someone a little more junior who could be trained in a number of different directions, and that way you're giving them challenge and growth and so forth. One of the problems here too is, budget pressure can really be tough. And, especially, with the inflation that we've had in the last few years and other, macroeconomic headwinds against many organizations today, it makes it hard to have a properly sized security team where you've got some senior people who are the leaders and the real thought leaders and the smart ones who know how things were made and can solve the hardest problems, together with some more junior people who are growing into these roles over many years. But anymore, organizations are so constrained by budget that they really only have just the critical people on their team. And so when someone walks out the door for a better offer somewhere else, they have no people that they can, fill that gap with in the interim. A more properly sized team that has one or more junior people, the junior people may not be able to do everything that the senior person did who walked out, but they can do something. But as a result, because many organizations don't have enough security staff, even when fully staffed, it really puts them in a bind where, now they have to find someone who's really capable, and it's going to take them months and months to do it. It's not a happy situation for sure, but that root cause sometimes goes back to the fact that the team wasn't big enough to begin with. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the more stressed and lean your team is running, inevitably you're going to have more turnover or decreased morale, which leads to worse performance. I mean, there's so many downstream effects of that. But yeah, I think retention is really one of the best possible hiring tools. Ironically, you're not hiring if you're retaining people, but that's the best thing you can do is prevention. What's the saying about prevention being worth an ounce of cure or something kind of like that, but for hiring and retaining people. Right. Pete, what I think is happening also is if you might remember how what we called just-in-time manufacturing began to be a thing in the 80s and 90s, I think, where, organizations like automobile manufacturers used to stockpile a lot of components and they could run their assembly line for weeks on all the materials and parts they had on hand. But that doesn't work anymore because the accountants didn't like it, because all that product just sitting there was only, liability on the balance sheet. Well, of course it was an asset as well, but it represented, capital that wasn't being used. So they went to just-in-time manufacturing to improve their financial numbers. But as you've got one parts shortage, like, wasn't there just like an aluminum plant that had a fire, and now Ford and others are having to slow their manufacturing down because they're not getting either the raw aluminum or the parts that they expect, and they have no standing pipeline of inventory to keep their manufacturing lines going. And so in cybersecurity, but IT and probably every other corporate department also works on, just in time. They have only the resources they need. They're very lean. And if someone walks out the door, they cannot do their job fully until they hire a replacement, which can be months and months. So again, that's the dilemma. I think it has, in some part, I think it's related to just in time.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't heard of that before, but yeah, I had heard of just in time, actually in business school. And I always found that very interesting that, yeah, I mean, there's less waste, I guess, that way, or, like you said, essentially less inventory just sitting around, but you also put yourself in a bad disaster recovery position, essentially.
Right. I mean, it's less waste, but more risk. And so you're moving the risk needle over, and you're basically betting that nothing bad is going to happen. That there are going to be no parts shortages or problems with, shipping, with truck or rail or whatever. And in the same way with organizations that have such a lean security team that they're in, almost a crisis when someone walks out the door, it's the same situation. It's cheaper, but much riskier.
Yeah. So, well, then I guess that would highlight the importance of contingency planning. What happens if somebody does walk out the door unexpectedly? I would argue if you're a good manager, the chances of that happening are relatively low because you're keeping on top of any disquiet in your team and that sort of thing. But you have to have a plan in place.
I mean, you can care for and take care of your, managers and line staff like I've done in the past. But, things still happen. Even if they love their job, maybe they have to relocate for family reasons, or something happens to them personally or in their family, and they need to have a career interruption, for instance. Even the best of managers and leaders have this happen because we're not in control of every aspect of an employee's life, nor should we. So there is still that risk that, anyone can go.
Yeah. Well, and people are fickle. If there's anything I've learned as a recruiter, it's that exactly, is that people are predictable in some ways and unpredictable in other ways. And you certainly can't control people even if you wanted to. So yeah, in my experience, I could manage the recruiting process as well as I possibly can. And I have perfected it, I think, over the years. I go so far as to say, I guess. But still, there will be some curveballs thrown in there that you just can't possibly anticipate. So yeah, the planning, I think, is so important to have that plan in place. What happens if somebody does leave unexpectedly, because it will happen eventually on a long enough timeline. And I think one of the best ways to prepare for that happening is to have cross-training and upskilling happening continuously. Very common, especially like you said, if you have more junior people on your team, if you're upskilling them into roles, into responsibilities that the people above them have, then you have a contingency plan in place. Plus, it's a retention tool for those more junior people.
Right. One kind of plan that I like to do, and I've done this in the past, I have found that in many organizations, some of the people in IT, they want to work on the security team. And so it's likely that there are potential internal transfer candidates in your organization right now. So it's just incumbent upon cybersecurity management and leadership to find those candidates and work with them. And they are people who are known to the company. They're already in the company, so they know the culture and everything. So internal transfers can be a good source, but you can't wait till the crisis happens. You can't wait till someone walks out the door to begin that effort. Again, this is something where you need to have relationships with people in the company who are potential transfer candidates, as well as people outside the company. I think that having informal type relationships inside and outside can really help speed up that process of backfilling that vacancy.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think a lot of people kind of neglected their networks over the last 10, 20 years when security was such a hot skill set. And then the economy kind of crashed the last few years. And, I think a lot of people were caught unaware. They were suddenly on the job market and they hadn't done much networking recently. They weren't going to events. And they got in a situation where they're like, well, boy, I really haven't kept up with all the people that I used to know. Now I'm in a bad situation and I need something. And people don't respond well to when you're only reaching out because you need something. It's
absolutely
a psychological thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. The time to begin networking and developing relationships outside your organization is not when the crisis hits. You've got to do a little bit of that every week. Just, build that circle of people, for various reasons, people that could be potential mentors for you, today or in the future, people who are potential employees, someday, and, other purposes as well. We can't exist as islands, in business. Success in business relies on the people we know and having those relationships, at all times.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I've long been a huge proponent for professionalism on LinkedIn, professionalism in person. But one thing I've kind of come to the realization about here in the last few years has been, I think I'm trying to be too professional almost. Like people want to have a connection with the real person and not a proxy for a person. They want to feel like they're actually getting to know somebody. So even just, building your network on LinkedIn and connecting with people over personal interests. There's a couple of guys that I connect with now that were big nature freaks. They're both bird watchers and I'm a plant guy, but just those little bit of those interests that we share in common with people lead them to remember you. And it almost seems like in this age where there's so much noise online and there's so many people that are job seeking, it can be so difficult to break through the noise, whether you're a job seeker or a hiring manager or just somebody who's a security executive. People know you and they remember you because of these little things that aren't necessarily your professional accomplishments, despite the fact that those are obviously extremely important. So,
yeah, for sure. I mean, we are just by our nature, we are, social beings, social animals, as it were. And, we rely on and thrive on relationships with other people. And, we have concentric circles of relationship, starting, marriage, family, coworkers, friends, and beyond. And so, we thrive on that and we need to use that. Social media has been great, but it hasn't been what it kind of promised to be because of, algorithms and unforeseen circumstances. It was supposed to bring people together, but it has resulted instead in echo chambers of dissent and division, unfortunately. And now there's so much AI crud that, when you see a posting in social media or even a photo of someone, is that the AI talking? We used to say, is that the alcohol talking in that posting? And now it's like, is that the AI talking? Is this person even real now? It's hard to know what's real and what to believe and what's embellished. So AI is great for many things, but it's not the best thing in social media.
Yeah, well, and that's why I really try and put like my personal personality stamp on all the posts that I do. I write like I talk, so it's very clear that it's a genuine post. But like you said, so much as it seems canned, some seem personal, and they're actually written by AI. you don't know anymore, especially as the tooling gets better and better. But anything you can do to show people who you really are, I think is a positive. And getting out there in person too. That's one of the pieces of advice I give to everybody who's a job seeker right now is, if you're one of 1,000 or 2,000 applicants, the chances your resume actually gets a view by any recruiter is extremely low. So the best thing you can do is shortcut to the front of the line, know the hiring manager from an event you met that person in person. And if you have that emotional human connection with somebody, it doesn't matter how many applicants, because they're not even viewing your application. They're viewing you as the person that you are.
Yep. That's that's probably the best reason for networking right there, and in-person networking if you can. I mean, it's in-person networking is so essential. I mean, we were kind of back on our heels, during the pandemic, and we've kind of slid into this habit of not showing up to events, but attending them virtually. It's easier, cheaper, but it's not good for networking and for developing more of those relationships. And you never know. The next person you meet could be someone that helps you get that next job, maybe years from now.
Yeah, well, and just building connections with people without a goal in mind is important too. Like I tend to kind of be that way. I'm like, okay, well, what's the goal here? What are we doing here? So I've had to kind of teach myself, like, look, no, you just got to be a super connector and talk to as many people as you can, because you never know where your paths may cross down the road. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to give the impression that the people you meet are, people that you're going to use later for your own purposes. I mean, there has to be give and take in a relationship, and a great way to develop relationships is be a mentor. For instance, because even that junior person that may lead you to a position opening. You never know, and they just come from anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, well, especially really bright people, regardless of their age or their station in the industry, especially people that I would consider super connectors. Those are people that you want to know, even if you have no idea how your paths may cross again, just because they're constantly connecting with so many people. So you end up essentially getting more connections through osmosis. There's one gal I'm thinking of in particular that I look at her LinkedIn connections, and she's connected with all of my ideal clients. Every single one of them, and all of their executives. And, she's relatively early in her career, but she's connected with all these executives because she's made it a distinct point for herself in her career to get out there and connect with as many people as possible. And then even just leveraging just a little bit of posting on LinkedIn plus connecting with all of these people, she's opening up doors for herself that she doesn't even know what they are yet. But you never know how that'll play out. For sure.
Right. And that's a good thought you've got there, because you want to build relationships, even if you don't know yet how you might be able to help them, or they may be able to help you, or so you don't want to develop relationships, with just, what's in it for me, because it might be what's in it for them. And helping someone first may be turned around later, where, that same person who you helped with something, again, that's a relationship with thing. Oh yeah, he helped me with that thing, and now we have this job opening in this department, and maybe he'd be interested. So
yeah, it's kind of like the idea of good karma. You're just putting out good karma into the world, good vibes, as they say, and you never know what'll happen, but it doesn't cost you anything really, except for maybe a little bit of your time to help somebody out. And there's so many different, to your point about mentors, if you want to be a mentor, there's so many places you can find mentees online these days. I have a whole list of Discord channels and Slack channels. There's one specific to GRC called GRC Meetup. LinkedIn, obviously, there's so many thousands of hopeful people that want to break into security right now, and there's just not enough jobs for them. Any thoughts on how we can, I guess, square that circle a little bit and open up more of these entry-level jobs in an environment where seems like more companies are hiring less and less? of the entry level
Yeah,
folks?
that's a tough one. And with cybersecurity, there's kind of two big factors that I see here. One is that if we think about what truly entry level really is, it means having very little experience, but enough aptitude to show that they can at least make progress and make a good start, right? But in cybersecurity, I've argued in the past that entry level jobs in cybersecurity are actually positions in the IT department. And the reason I say that is because in cybersecurity, we exist as a profession because of what IT departments do and don't do, right? If they did a great job of security, there wouldn't be cybersecurity departments. I know that sounds snarky and like maybe I'm, kind of wagging my finger at IT, shame on you, but well, I have a career because of it. But I've spent a third of my career in IT, and I get it. They are value creation, we are value protection, and these missions kind of oppose each other sometimes, and there's some friction there because we want to make sure that infrastructure and systems are safe, but sometimes that means a little bit of delay or extra cost in order to make it safe. And we don't ever want to, do the "I told you so," but sometimes we do. So that's one thing in terms of entry level. And again, the reason why I look to IT departments sometimes for those internal transfers is because they have been developing knowledge about how systems and networks work. And that is an essential knowledge base for almost any cybersecurity position to have. Can you imagine hiring a SOC analyst who doesn't know how operating systems or networks work, or even the barest amount about TCP/IP and what routers and switches are? I mean, do you really want to start with someone that has so little knowledge there? I don't think so. So that's why I think entry level really means let's bring them out of IT and into cybersecurity. The other part of the headwind that we're starting to see now is that it looks as though organizations are utilizing AI agents and other AI capabilities in lieu of hiring entry-level people. So I know that's really bad news in our industry and in other industries, but the writing is on the wall. Companies are doing it now. Although I think the pendulum is going to swing back the other way when organizations find out that, that didn't work out so great. And it's going to end up somewhere in the middle where organizations rely on AI a lot, but they still need people to do work.
Well, yeah, and check the work of the agents. I was just thinking about what are the realistically in this environment where I'm hearing that even help desk roles are getting inundated with applicants. It's like, if you can't even get started on the IT ladder, where do you get started in IT to eventually become a security professional? And I have to think the only other option would be do the more people oriented type of jobs, like become a sales development or business development representative at a tech company. And through osmosis, maybe you work with some of the pre-sales department or, something else, and you start to gain some technical knowledge that way. And then maybe you can kind of transfer within a given company into their IT department, then eventually security. All of that to say, it seems like nowadays it's getting even more difficult, and it needs to be even more of a long-term focus versus assuming that, hey, I got this degree and a couple of certifications, I'm just going to be able to jump into a technical role. Maybe you have to start in a non-technical role that's adjacent to a technical role. I don't know. Could you see that as being an option?
I definitely can. I mean, this isn't the mid 90s, where if all you had to do is be able to fog a mirror and show some proof of identification and you could be hired. It's much more difficult today. But yeah, I think that's definitely a good approach, and I've seen a lot of people do it. I think part of this is that people aren't willing to have the patience to play the long game. They want the results now. They want to, they think that they should be able to get the ultimate position today. I mean, not the 10 years from now position, but the 2 years from now position. But realistically, there are too many applicants for too few jobs. But then this is the conundrum, because if there's really a skills shortage, then why are there so many applicants for so few jobs? It seems like kind of both are happening at the same time, and I'm not sure what to make of that. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think there's only shortages for certain very niche skill sets right now, but broadly there are enough bodies to fill the amount of open jobs. In fact, there's a surplus of people for the number of open jobs, but there's more open jobs in these very niche disciplines where not enough people exist with those skill sets. It's like a giant matching problem, essentially. Well, and a surplus of candidates. So that's why I think people do need to take on mentees, as many as they can, go to these communities where these hopefuls hang out, and maybe in a lot of cases adjust expectations with folks. Maybe that's most of what the security leaders out there need to do, because people have these expectations. They've been sold this bill of goods by the certification companies and degree programs that, get this magic certification or degree and make $100K in security. Nobody told them that they'd have to work in IT for 5 years before they could even be considered for an entry-level security role.
Right. Well, I mean, at least they have, a STEM education, so they don't have to pull shots for a living, because that would be a lot harder, right? So yeah, for those organizations that have to fill those niche jobs, I mean, some of them are going to have to really be willing to hire for aptitude and train for skill. Otherwise, they're going to have to wait for that unicorn. And unless they are a marquee company, the best talent wants to go to the best companies, and they're not going to even bother applying for jobs in companies that don't have a known name, because, the better people, they want the resume to be a top resume with blue chip employer names on it. And so there's, part of the gap is self-inflicted, both by candidates and by employers.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
We're all guilty.
Yeah. Well, and now you're starting to see a rash of people that are, as they say, obsessed with their exes on LinkedIn, where it's, ex EY, ex PwC, ex Deloitte, or, ex Facebook, ex, Netflix, that sort of thing. So yeah, you're totally right that once you get in these certain circles, it seems like you're kind of in, and then you can write your own ticket as far as what companies you go to next, especially if you have one of those niche skill sets. I'm a big believer in outbound recruiting. That's what I do. I go out to the market and find the most ideal fits for my clients, and they may not always have the most, household names or the best benefits or whatever. But as long as they're at least somewhat flexible on their requirements, or their salary is at least market rate, or if it isn't, if they're flexible on their requirements, they can still find somebody that's excited about that job. But that requires going outbound and finding people versus kind of just taking what you can get on the inbound application side. And, I'm very vocal about the fact that I think that we could solve 99% of recruiting issues with just going outbound and searching for people versus posting a job and praying that the right person applies, especially if we have a niche job where we've combined or too broad of a job where we've combined 3 separate jobs into a single job description, and then hope that somebody happens to have amassed those exact same skills as the person who just left, who's been there for 10 years. Because I think that's what happens often is you'll get these combined job descriptions because that was one person, but maybe that one person doesn't exist elsewhere out there in the market.
Right, for sure. Another factor I think that's come into play now is that since the pandemic, the proportion of the overall workforce in the world and in this country that are working remote has increased a lot. I just did some reading on this the other day, but I don't remember the numbers in my head, but I'm going to just kind of throw a dart at this and say that before the pandemic, it was like 8% of people were fully remote. But now it's, and then during the pandemic, of course, it was like 20, 30 or more percent, but it has settled down to a new higher level that's something like 12 or 15%. I don't remember what it is exactly. So from the perspective of employers, what this means is that if you are willing to hire a remote person, then that means that you have access to a much larger labor pool. But also you are competing with many more companies for that same talent. But then if you are the person looking for a job and you're willing to work remotely, then you can be a candidate for many more companies, not just the ones that are within commuting distance of where you live, but, across the entire country and beyond. But then again, you're also competing with a lot of other people who are also, able and willing to work remotely. So again, it's the sword cuts both ways. You have access to more markets, but then you're competing with more people in those markets.
Yeah, well, and I believe the stats on remote work probably at this point are trending down, not up, where companies are starting to go back to return to office policies. And the
True.
people got spoiled, and now they're not willing to do that. But I think part of that or that phenomenon is causing people to be out of work a lot longer than they would have been 5+ years ago, because they got used to working remotely. Maybe they moved to the middle of the country where there's not as many on-site jobs. They can't just not accept the remote role anymore if there's no jobs local to them. So I think that's another big issue we're seeing right now, where people are not getting hired because so many people are competing for the same few remote jobs when they're becoming vanishingly less likely to happen.
For sure. Yeah, I know a lot of people, I mean, not personally, but I know of large numbers of people who left their high paying, in the city corporate jobs. They moved to the country where they had a lower cost of living, and they could, get a bigger house or, buy their first house. But then, the return to work happened and they're thinking, oh crap, now I got to move back. And, now that it seems more expensive because of the lifestyle that we've changed for ourselves. And, now that means, more sacrifice. So yes, the winds are definitely shifting and blowing from multiple directions here, in terms of just how the country's workforce is constituted and, where and how people work. So yeah, I don't think this is settled yet. And I think you're right that the percentage of full-time remote people is gradually declining, but I think it is going to, when it finally gets to equilibrium, it's going to be a higher number than it was before 2020.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Well, and especially I think too is, Gen Z starts to become in more executive positions. I think they're, as a generation, more remote first than any previous generations, and they'll institute a lot more remote work policies, and we'll see declining office leases and all of that good stuff. But for now, yeah, we're in a slight little, trending down valley. But yeah, it's interesting to watch. I think there's kind of a good lesson in there probably that, hey, live below your means, because you never know when your standard of living or your salary is going to increase or decrease. It's better to have a little headroom there, so you're not putting yourself in a bad position.
Yeah, I've been a big advocate of just, reducing your debt as much as possible and lowering your standard of living. Be willing to buy, drive an older car and not live in the biggest house that your credit rating and your income level will afford you today, because then you end up just building yourself a trap that is then very hard to get out of. I've been there. I've seen a lot of other people be in that themselves, and the more you can live below your means, the more flexibility you'll have, and that can help you get access to more positions in more companies, especially if you're willing to play the long game instead of the short game, to get into the company you want, but be willing to accept a lower paying position with the hopes that you'll eventually grow into what you really want to be doing 5 years from now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Back to the long game point. Yeah. I think a lot of this, for some reason in our society today, it's a lot about short-term gratification. And I think social media has probably only made that worse. Our attention spans have gotten shorter. People aren't planning for the future as much. Savings are decreasing. And part of that's cost of living going up too. But yeah, that's maybe a conversation to go deeper on another day. But
for sure.
We're coming up on time here, Peter. So just one last question for you. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
other things. Well, I think I go back to a little bit about what we talked about a little while ago, and that is that employers, they need to play the long game as well and be willing to find candidates with the right aptitude and with a track record of being able to learn new things and do well with them. That I think would help this so-called skills shortage that I think exists in part by, instead of waiting for that unicorn, to find people with the right aptitude, the right attitude and culture fit. And I've hired this way many times in the past, where I hire for attitude and train for skills. Because if you do it the other way around, if you hire for skills, you can't train different attitudes into people. If they don't have initiative, for instance, then you can't train people to have initiative. It's just, they just won't have it. But if someone has great aptitude, great attitude, and an ability to learn, and you need to train them on some new thing, then chances are they're going to learn it and they're going to succeed there.
Yeah, well, and personalities change very little over somebody's lifetime, regardless of external influences. So that tracks too. Well, it's a great point, great place to end. If people want to reach out to you or keep up with the work that you do, what's the best way to do so?
Well, let's see. I'm on LinkedIn, Peter H. Gregory. Also, you can go to my website, peterhgregory.com. You can find me there. I've got my books, articles, interviews, other things on there, and you can find me in either of those ways very easily.
Very cool. And we'll put the links in the description. Well, thanks for your time, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.